Thanks, Eric. It is quite an honor for me to be here to speak to you because it feels like just yesterday that I was sitting out there. But you can probably look at me and figure out that it wasn't just yesterday. It was 35 years ago. But it's been a very interesting 35 years. And I entitled this talk, Entrepreneurs, It's Better to Be Good Than Lucky. That's because I feel like my entire career has been a series of haphazard decisions that turned out good. But looking back on them, if I could have known the gravity of some of those decisions, I might have put some more thought into them or put some logic around how I was making those decisions. So I thought today I'd spend a little bit of time talking about my career and some of those decisions and how arbitrary they felt at the time and then how they worked out. But I'm really here because I'm very passionate about entrepreneurialism and I enjoy building something from nothing, and I'm involved in a lot of things that are startup and entrepreneurially oriented, and they just are a very broad range of projects that the projects themselves are interesting. So I thought I would talk about some of those. And then finally, I am an engineer, so I think I get to say this. In general, engineers suck at being entrepreneurs. And so I want to talk a little bit about why that is and how you try to proactively keep that from happening in case you're interested in being an entrepreneur yourself. As I mentioned, I've made a lot of decisions that were really kind of random. And in looking back, they worked out well, but I should have applied more decision-making process around some of them. And so let's take a look at what some of those were. I never considered when I was young that I could proactively choose what industry I wanted to work in. As a high school student, my mother knew the guy that owned the phone company in my hometown, and he was kind enough to give me a drafting job in his office in the summer. And that introduced me to telephone and phone companies. By the way, the name of that phone company was the Fail System. It was a family name, but I mean, come on, let's call it something other than the Fail System. But that got me interested in a particular path. And one of the things that worked out well for me is I have had a career in the communications field, electrical communications field. And it turned out that when I entered that field, it was just beginning to take off. And it's been a growth industry for the last 30 years. In figuring out what you want to do for your career, you should at least proactively think about what industries have 30 years worth of growth opportunity coming, because if the industry that you're in is growing, it inherently provides opportunity for you and opportunity for you to grow. When I came to Mississippi State, I actually showed up. By the way, the little town I grew up in, we didn't have a guidance counselor in our school. I knew very little about careers. I had an interest in architecture. And so when I came to State, the first day, I came to register as an architect. But I'd learned that day that architecture was a 5-year program, and I didn't want to go to college for 5 years. So I asked, what's kind of like architecture that has a lot of math and science? And someone said engineering, and I said, okay, well, I'll do that. Next, arbitrary decision. Turns out that engineering was a great field to choose because it was ripe with opportunity. And I've heard some parents encourage their children that in life, what you have to do is follow your passion. Well, I'm all about you being passionate about what you do, but you should purposefully assess, if I am successful in following this passion, will I be able to earn a living for my family? And if the answer is no, maybe that passion should become a hobby, and you should go get something that you would actually enjoy doing that you could provide for your family. I wound up as an electrical engineer because 2 years into the engineering program, you have to decide which path you're going to go. And at the time, I was playing guitar in a rock and roll band, and my guitar amplifier was busted, and I had no money to fix it. And so I thought, well, maybe if I become an electrical engineer, I can figure out how to fix my guitar amp. And that's the sum total of the decision process that went into me becoming an electrical engineer. Turns out, I did wind up being able to talk somebody in the EE department into fixing my guitar amp. But, you know, looking at where you guys are, there's a more logical way, a more data-driven way to make that determination. If you're interested in engineering, and I hear that maybe 40% of you or so are engineer majors, then in understanding where the opportunity is going to lie, this is a supply and demand. It's easy to go figure out where the opportunities lie job-wise. You can look at the enrollment data and see how many students are going which direction. You can figure out where the supply and demand balance is off so that you can maximize your opportunity by picking a path that is right with the opportunity, purposefully. After I graduated from Mississippi State, I went to work for ITT Telecommunications. And fortunately, this company is no longer around. I know why this company is no longer around. And like everything in life, it served as a good example. But it served as a good example of how not to run a company. But when I went to work there, when I graduated, I thought the mission was get a degree, get a job with a big company, things would be great. When I graduated Mississippi State, I didn't know what entrepreneurs were. I probably couldn't spell entrepreneur at that time. I went to work for a big company, and I got inside the company, and it was apparent they were dysfunctional. They had arbitrary rules, and I worked in the engineering department, and engineers don't like being told what to do. But we had a policy that said engineers had to wear ties to work. It didn't say where you had to wear it. So some of the engineers would wear it with it wrapped around their head and hanging off the side of their head. Some would wear it around their arms. Some would wear the ones that were like, this wide and this long. And management had created this policy in hopes of having a very professional work environment. But this policy created just the opposite. And nobody paid attention to the fact that what they were trying to accomplish wasn't working. And the rest of the company worked very similarly. So I thought, God, this is how companies work? I don't really understand this. Then a couple of years into that gig, I was going to be relocated. And in doing so, I thought, well, if I have to move, I'm going to go looking for another job. And I did. And fortunately, I found a job in Huntsville, Alabama, at a company that was driven by an entrepreneur who was really good at what he does. And so a better way for picking where you go to work is for you to think that your mission as you graduate from college is to be just as rigorous in interviewing the company for whom you go to work as they are in interviewing you. Because if you get selected to go to work for a company that's dysfunctional, that's not helpful in your career. So figure out if that's a place you want to work. And fortunately, many of you are going to be presented with multiple opportunities when you leave school. And be selective. Think about the fact that you have some control over making this decision. When I went to work for the company in Huntsville, it was the thing that opened my eyes to the fact that all companies are not created equal. Mark Smith was an entrepreneur that founded a company called UDS, and Mark was very gifted. He was a very studied man. He was an engineer, but he was a businessman, and he understood people, understood how to motivate people, understood how to organize a company. And he built a very successful organization where people enjoyed working, where they worked together, where they produced a product and were very productive in the process. And Mark sold that company to Motorola. And in doing so, Mark made a very large pile of money. And then over the next few years, Motorola came in and started to impose big corporate rules on what had been an entrepreneurial, successful company. And Mark thought, I don't have to do that. So he left to go start a new company. That company was Adtran. And at the time Mark left to go start Adtran, I left with some buddies to go start what turned out to be my very first entrepreneurial activity. So better way number 4 is, when you're in your work environment, spend time and energy trying to figure out who it is you can learn from. In my case, I feel like I fell into an opportunity to work with a very talented businessman and entrepreneur. But in looking at the way things operate today, entrepreneurs are generally very willing to help those who are aspiring to be entrepreneurs. So go seek out those people who are willing to help and mentor, and find mentors who can help you understand what it is you have to do to try to be successful yourself. So this company that we started was called PTT. And We were building products that we sold to suppliers of communications products so they could test their gear of how it's going to work anywhere in the world. And we had a really fun time, but before we started the company, we did not go through any business due diligence to try to understand if we built this thing, how many of them we would be able to sell. We saw a need for this, thought everybody would see the same need. And it turned out after we put some numbers around the market opportunity, the opportunity for this was maybe $20 million worldwide. And I'm telling you, you will work just as hard trying to build a company to pursue a total available market of $20 million as you will if the market's $200 million or $2 billion. And admittedly, $2 billion or $200 billion markets attract a different class of competitors, but ensure that the market you're pursuing is actually viable to try to fulfill whatever needs you have in building a company. And you know, in building a company, you can look at it from, I want to build a lifestyle for me. Total available market of $10 million a year can do that easily. You can say, I want to build a nice sized company and be successful. $100 million market, you get a good share of that, can be that. If you want to build a very large company, you need a market cap, total market available, something bigger than $100 million, because odds are you're not going to get it all. And to get a company into a 20 or 30 or $40 million range is a very successful effort to go from 0 to 40 million bucks. So understand that market opportunity before you actually jump headlong. Now, having worked with Mark for a few years before we both went different ways, Adtran was a company that Mark had started that was pursuing a market opportunity that was maybe $20 billion worldwide. And they were growing very quickly and they were doing very well. And we, two companies knew each other. Adtran needed an infusion of people. Our company had a lot of people that had worked together, that had communication skills. So Adtran acquired our company and we went to work within Adtran. We operated as a subsidiary of Adtran for maybe a year. And then we completely shut that down in favor of working on products that Adtran needed, because Adtran's market opportunity was 100 times bigger than the market opportunity we were pursuing, and it was in all of our best financial interest to go pursue the bigger market opportunity. I stayed with Adtran for 18 years. It was a fantastic phase of my career. Adtran went public in 1994. When I left Adtran in 2007, we were about 2,000 employees. I was president COO at the time, but we were public. We were 2,000 employees. We were doing business in lots of countries. And the role and responsibility of a president of a public company that's $500 million in revenue, it's not exactly the thing that I want to get up and do every day, because I enjoy building something out of nothing, working in small companies. At the time, I was on the board of directors of a company called Digium. Digium was the brainchild of a guy named Mark Spencer. Mark is a software developer, and when he was in college at Auburn, he started this project called Asterisk. Asterisk is an open source communications software engine from which you can build almost any communications application. So if you're smart about software and communications and computers and networking, you can take Asterisk, think of it as an engine, do some work to it, and transform it into a phone system to run your business, which lots of people did. Or you could use it in some special way to run your company. Vonage built their entire voicemail system out of Asterisk. The thing that is today is Google Voice was a company called Grand Central that Google bought that ran its entire infrastructure on Asterisk. So Asterisk, as an open source project, had been deployed all over the world and was very successful. But an open source project is software that you give away. And it was at the time, there wasn't much of a business model behind what Mark had created with Asterisk. And it attracted the attention of a venture capitalist out of Boston who said, wow, Asterisk is doing great worldwide. There's a business opportunity to transform a company into products and services around Asterisk. And he came to Mark and convinced Mark to accept an investment. Part of that convinced Mark that he had to attract other people into leadership roles. And somehow he also talked me into leaving Etran and running the company. So for the last 8 years, I have been CEO of Digium. And we've been working to build a company around an open source project. And the best way to think about what we've done is really a razor and razor blades approach. We give away something, the razor, that's the open source software, and it creates demand for things that we can sell, the razor blades. So over time, we created a commercially licensed version of the software. We created hardware products to let you connect Asterisk into the public switch telephone network. We created software products built off of Asterisk. We created IP phones to go on a desktop. We created apps that allow your mobile phone to be an extension off of your business system. We built a whole range of products around Asterisk to transform the success of the open source project into a successful open source project with a company built around it. So Asterisk represents a marketing tool for Digium. Asterisk goes places that Digium, we're roughly a 200-person company, could never go. And it goes there in a very viral way. Developers inside of large companies all over the world are looking for very low-cost ways to serve their business. Open source software has become a mechanism to get projects built very quickly, and it's become very popular among the developer community. So Asterisk, as this engine, is turned into all these types of products, and that creates awareness and visibility for Digium. It is part of how we leverage our customer acquisition. We're going to talk more about customer acquisition as we go a little further along. But Asterisk can fit in a whole number of spots. But in general, any communications need could be met with Asterisk as the engine. So over time, we have built Digium as a company that has two missions. One, to continue the open source project, and then to build a for-profit company that provides services and products based off of that open source engine. And that has led to where we are today as a supplier of communication products and services to small and medium-sized businesses. Now, along the way, I got involved in a whole bunch of other young startup efforts in Huntsville, and I thought we could talk about some of those just because some of them are so bizarre that you think if you have an idea and you wonder, is this idea a good idea or not? One, it's up to you to do some market and customer validation. But when you hear what some of these ideas are and how they have worked out, maybe you'll understand that this market is gigantic and there's opportunity for lots of stuff along the way. One of the companies I've been involved in is a company called Gator. Gator builds blow-up satellite dishes. Now, the guy who started Gator had been in the military, and he saw that they were driving these trucks around with satellites on the back of them that were rigid, and they represent targets for enemies, and they're not transportable. And he thought, I think I can build a blow-up satellite dish. And he did. And that became a very viable product. This company existed for maybe 12 years. It was sold a year and a half ago, and this company sold for $230 million. Started in Huntsville out of nothing, blow-up satellite dishes, $230 million. Huntsville is a very unique community. There's something going on in Huntsville now that is, to me, exceptionally exciting, and it's called the Hudson Alpha Institute for Biotechnology. It was started by two successful entrepreneurs from Huntsville who donated $40 million of their own dollars, got it matched by $40 million from the state of Alabama, and they built this institute. And the philosophy of the institute is half of it is a research organization that looks a lot like a university. There are principal investigators. They're doing primary research. They're funded through grants, private donations. And the other half is an incubator for biotech companies. And the logic is that the researchers are motivated by wanting to have a discovery, write a paper about it, have all of their peers see how smart they are, and then move on to the next hard problem. While entrepreneurs are looking for ideas to take to market. So if you get these two to work together, there might be ideas that would improve human health that can come to market more quickly. Today, there are 34 companies in the incubator side of Hudson Alpha, and they're doing some absolutely remarkable things. This company, Kylos Genetics, is working a very cost-effective way to sequence a very narrow section of your DNA. The fact that they're sequencing a very narrow section means they can do it at a low cost. And in fact, the way they've constructed their process, they're able to take that section of the DNA, called an exome, from 100 people, and they run that at one time. So you got one sequencing machine to do that. And the segment of the exome they're sequencing is the one that has genes that are associated with how your body is going to metabolize medicines. So they can do a $99 sequence on you, on a portion of your DNA, and tell you if you get cancer, if certain types of cancer drugs are going to work for you. They will tell you if opioid-based pain relief medicines will work for you. They can tell you if you have high cholesterol, if some of the cholesterol drugs will work for you. And for $99, they are creating this market to help enable medicine so that you can make smarter decisions about treating yourself when things don't go right. Got involved with this company called 3GIS. They are a global information systems company. They build a product that allows people who are installing fiber networks to know where their fiber is in the ground and what strands are associated with what data streams and what customers. 10 years ago, when this company started, that was a pretty small market. Today, with projects like Google Fiber, things are going great guns. This company will grow double this year. They'll be up to like 100 people, and this year they'll do about $15 million in revenue. I got involved with this company. It was called Southern Vision Systems. Southern Vision Systems builds a campus-wide digital signage product that works across an IP infrastructure. So you can put 50 big monitors across MSU's campus, you can connect them all through Ethernet switching, and drive them all with Ethernet outputs so that you can coordinate all the signage across the campus. They won a contract to install the digital signage on Google's campus in San Jose, and the next year they were acquired by Harman for $25 million. Conversant Bio is interesting because one of the things I have always been taught is don't start a company in an area where you have no expertise. Well, the guys who are running Conversant Bio are bankers. They were bankers who got tired of doing banking, and they thought biotech is going to be an opportunity that's going to change the world. How could we go fit into that world? And they created a company. And what Conversant Bio does is they connect researchers, medical researchers, with the types of samples they need to do their research. So if you were doing research on liver cancer, for example, in order for you to do your research, what you would like to have is liver cancer cells from 600 patients. So you can go look for commonalities across these patients. Well, they have put a mechanism in place, a sourcing process, to go collect human tissue, human cells, and human blood of very specific types for the purposes of enabling researchers to do research in the medical field. And this company is going to do $12 million of business or so this year, and they're now up to about 60 employees. Tango Tango is another interesting story. They have just started. It was a guy that I met in a coffee shop, and he was an asterisk enthusiast, and he was talking about asterisk. He comes from a public safety sector, so he's worked in police forces and 911 emergency notification projects in the past, and he noticed or understands that the world of communications inside of law enforcement is 30 years ago. It's based on these handheld radios that cost $6,000 each, and a private radio network that they only can talk to their radios, so the fire department can't talk to the police department. He's building a product that will replace those $6,000 radios with a ruggedized cell phone that has the same push-to-talk capabilities. And if any of you have used a collaboration tool called Slack, a control mechanism like Slack, so that on the fly, you could set up an event that says, for this fire in Huntsville, police needs to talk to the fire, needs to talk to whatever other agencies. Put them in that group, and all of a sudden they can push to talk to each other on the scene, which doesn't exist today. Motorola is going to be really unhappy when they figure out what's going on inside of Tango Tango. And so everything I've talked about is tech or biotech, only because that's where I tend to hang out. But I have been involved in one entrepreneurial activity that is a bank. It's a group of guys in Birmingham, Alabama, that started a new bank. It's called Service First. And they started it at a time when the trend was mega banks having 1,000 branches and everybody doing retail business. And they recognized there is an opportunity to add very high value banking services to entrepreneurs, to business owners, and to their small businesses. So they created a bank that really has very few branches, does everything online, and they tailor themselves to this particular segment of the market. They've gone from zero 8 years ago to having gone public 18 months ago, and today are in the range of $8 billion in banking assets, and have done phenomenally. So, you don't have to have, some gigantically innovative idea to be able to start a company, but you do have to have a marketable idea. In the case of the bank, they were serving what they saw as an underserved segment of the market. And because I come from an engineering background, I think it's okay for me to say, in general, engineers suck as being an entrepreneur. And there are a few reasons why that's the case. Number one is most engineering personalities do not match the characteristics necessary to be a good entrepreneur. So to be an entrepreneur, you need to be a risk taker. Most engineers are not risk takers. You need to have social skills and be flexible and fast moving. Most engineers are conservative and very cautious. So characteristically, they're not typically a good match for the entrepreneurial side. Engineers are not often taught business fundamentals in school. So they're not thinking about the business of running a business. So if you want to be an entrepreneur, one of the things to do is to do a true assessment of yourself and understand if you have the right personality, the right characteristics to be a successful entrepreneur. And if you want to know, if you want some insight into your personality, if you've never done a personality assessment, I highly encourage you to go do one. They're available online. Some of them are for free. The one we have used most often is called the DISC analysis. And it's a 20-minute online set of questions that at the end, it will spit you a report that will explain to you your personality type. And personality types, for their purposes, are classified into 1 of 4 categories: a D, an I, an S, or a C. And in general, the characteristics are associated with adjectives that match that first letter. So if you are a D, for example, you are driven, typically dictatorial, maybe dominating. And so entrepreneurs, salespeople, hard drivers, typically turn out to be Ds. Most engineers turn out to be Cs. Now, I have no understanding if these personality types are drawn to these professions, or because you chose this profession, you wind up developing those personality types. But in general, I agree that this is the way it works. Engineers are typically conscientious and cautious and risk-averse. And so, step one, understand yourself. You can do this one for like $25 online. I think it's really worth it. There are no right or wrong answers. I have everyone in our company do a DISC analysis, not because I'm trying to get inside their head, but because I want to know how do I maximize my opportunity to get what I want from them. If I know you are a D, Ds have no attention to detail. They want the shortest version of the story possible, and then they want you out of their office. So I can't go into our sales guy, who is a big D, and say, I got have to give him the snippets and then try to get him on board with what I want. Engineers, on the other hand, as Cs, typically don't want to be told the answer. They want to be given the problem and allowed to come to their own conclusion of what the right answer is. So in approaching them, I try to present them the problem. I try to present it in a fashion where the only conclusion they can come to is the one I want them to come to, but still, they get to make the decision. I can't walk in and tell them what the right answer is. There's a venture capitalist institute that did a survey of what are the characteristics of successful entrepreneurs. And interestingly, the number one most important trait of or common trait of successful entrepreneurs is interest in novelty. So if you don't have a passion for figuring out how to do things differently or how to do things in a novel fashion, then that's at a discount for being a great entrepreneur. You must be able to think on your feet, and it turns out that age is a factor, and unfortunately, older translates into more success. What they found, did that go the right way? Nope. Oh well. What they found is that young entrepreneurs have about a 17% chance of being successful. If you have been a successful entrepreneur in your past, you have about a 30% chance of being successful. And if you are an entrepreneur who has failed at least once in your past, you have about a 20% chance of being successful. All right, the next problem of what causes engineers not to be great entrepreneurs is we fall in love with our product or our technology. We are convinced that if we like it, everybody else is going to like it. And if we build it, they will come. And I'm telling you that is just not the case. In general, the world does not care about what you have invented or built. And so it's incumbent upon the engineers to go do market validation, to understand if customers want to buy this thing that you have invented. And there are lots of books written on this topic. One of the most popular ones is The Lean Startup. Lean Startup will help you understand how do you take an idea and turn it into a minimum viable product and go test it and get customers to tell you if they're going to want that product or not, or what you have to do to it to make it a better product. So if that hasn't been covered in this class, then I'd highly encourage you to go read a copy of The Lean Startup. So how do you avoid that? Don't fall in love with your technology. Now, I'm not saying don't love what you're doing. I'm saying don't do that only. Don't do it at the expense of doing your homework to determine if this is a marketable idea or product. And the final reason that engineers often fail as entrepreneurs is you don't pay attention to the business metrics of whether a business can be successful or not. And to some degree, you don't get enough of that training in college. Now, hopefully, the entrepreneurial series and class introduce you to lots of business concepts. Maybe some of you are ultimately go on to get MBAs or take classes in the business world, or many of you are business majors yourself. But just because your technology is something people want, if they're not willing to pay for it, then that creates a problem for you. So, the thing to do to understand if you can turn an idea or a product into a product is to go model what's it going to cost for you to acquire a customer. Cost of customer acquisition is a term called CAC. And then, how much money can you make from this customer over the lifetime of them being your customer? That's called the long-term value. And then the relationship between CAC and LTV will tell you whether you can have a successful business or not. And if you are the entrepreneur trying to drive the business, then what you want to do is to try to understand how you can disrupt and position yourself into a market space where there is inherent opportunity for you. And today, most business models are transitioning to some form of a web-based opportunity, whether it is developing software, which is things that we do, or scheduling rides in an automobile. The web is transforming the way businesses operate. But you can easily create a model that is out of balance. If your cost to acquire the customer is bigger than the long-term value you're going to get from that customer, that is an out-of-balance business model. So, how do you solve that? You do your homework to figure out what it's going to cost you to acquire a customer, with the goal of creating a model that looks like this, where your cost of customer acquisition is less than the lifetime value of that customer. And in fact, there are some metrics. If you are interested in attracting investors into your company, venture capitalists, who are the shrewdest of those investors, are going to require that you can meet a couple of hurdles. One is, if your LTV is at least 3 times the cost of acquiring your customer, they'll see that as a properly balanced business model. They also want you to be able to recover your cost of acquiring that customer within 12 months. Because if you can't, you're sinking cash into the business. It takes a very long time to come back. So they want you to be cash flow positive quickly, and they want you to have a well-balanced business model. And these are metrics that will ensure that can happen. So as the entrepreneur, you have to become completely focused on, how do I lower my cost of customer acquisition, and how do I increase my long-term value for my customers? How do I balance these two equations? If you look at one of the areas that engineers and many entrepreneurs fail to spend enough energy on, is understanding how you sell something once you have it. And there's all sorts of models of how you can sell. You can sell things that have some viral connection on one end, all the way up to you pay a salesperson to go out and sell this all day long on the other end. But in general, the less the touch, the lower the cost is, and then the higher the touch, the higher the cost is of selling that product. So what you want to try to do is understand how you minimize that cost of acquiring the customers, and you can think about how you acquire customers in terms of funnels. In many business models, you're encouraged to think about, how do I get customers to know who I am, and then try my product, and then buy my product. And those are different stages of a funnel, and you need to understand how you improve and get customers to go all the way to the bottom of that funnel to make you successful. Within our company, we track all these metrics of, what did it take to get somebody to come to our website? Of the ones who came, how many of them actually downloaded a product? From the ones who downloaded, how many actually paid us money associated with it? And then we do all this testing to figure out how you could improve the percentages of those conversion rates along the way for the goal of lowering your cost of customer acquisition. You also need to, on the other side of the equation, is understanding how you grow the long-term value of every customer. There's a number of techniques associated with how you can do that. Once again, it is balancing this business model. The investing world has become very interested in understanding not just whether your company can produce revenue or not, but what kind of revenue is your company going to produce. And there's different kinds of revenue. If I sell you an iPhone and it costs $600, then you gave me $600 and that's your iPhone. But if you wanted to be able to have the latest and greatest iPhone every year for the rest of your life, maybe you pay me $30 a month, and my commitment to you is I'm going to make sure you've got the latest and greatest iPhone for the rest of the time you're on my contract. The first revenue is one-time revenue. The second is recurring revenue. And the investment world wants companies that have recurring revenue sources today. And in fact, they're willing to pay for it. If we had a company that sold iPhones one time, and we were selling $20 million a year of new iPhones, and you wanted to sell that company under today's valuation metrics, that's probably worth $10 million. If you have that same company that's doing $20 million worth of recurring monthly revenue, supplying your iPhone, the latest one, on a monthly contract for the rest of your contract time, that's recurring revenue, it's worth maybe $60 million. So just understanding how to structure the business model can make, in this case, a 6x difference in the value of your company if you ever get to the spot where you want to sell it. If you ask why do investors care about recurring revenue, if you think about the analogy of having to eat every day, in the one-time revenue model, when you wake up tomorrow morning, you have to go kill or find whatever it is you're going to eat, because the things you killed or found yesterday are no longer there. And the recurring revenue model is like waking up the next day and having food on the table, because all those customers that you attracted in the last months are still there, and they're still paying you. Digium is an example of a company that has spent a lot of energy trying to lower our cost of customer acquisition and increase our lifetime value of our customers. So let's look at an example of how we've gone about solving this problem. We're an open source company. We give away software. That inherently seems like a bad business idea, and it does create challenges in building a business, but think of it as a marketing tool. The fact that we give away software, people come to us to get it. We didn't have to go find them. It's the difference in outbound selling and inbound marketing. So now we know who those people are. That helps to lower our cost of customer acquisition. Our cost is the cost of maintaining the Asterisk project and keeping it desirable and people all over the world wanting to come get it. It is much cheaper than advertising and building a sales force and going all over the world. And so we take that and then transition it into products and services that we can sell because we have a low cost of customer acquisition. And every time we can create a new product that customer may want to buy, we can cross-sell or upsell in maximizing our LTV. So if you went to our website, you would see that we use the project itself as a way to draw people into us. And then when you get drawn into us, we'll start trying to convert you into a paying customer. If we can convert enough people into a paying customer, we can better balance our cost of customer acquisition into our long-term value of a customer. And we can improve the metrics all the way down the funnel to have more customers fall out the bottom as paying customers. So, to summarize the things that I think are helpful in planning your career and building an entrepreneurial business, number one is take total control of wherever it is you land to start your career or start your company. Make sure that you're in an industry that has vibrance and can grow for a long time. That in itself will create opportunity to you. Make sure you are with a good company, or that the company you start is built to be an entrepreneurial, productive company without lots of arbitrary rules and regulations that turn people away. Don't fall in love with your product. Ensure that if your personality isn't well suited to be an entrepreneur, and that's something you feel strongly about doing, go surround yourself with people who can overcome whatever the shortcomings are in your skill set to be an entrepreneur. Do not fall in love with your technology only. Fall in love with the technology and a business around it. And spend enough time to understand that whatever it is you want to do really can transform itself into a successful, well-balanced business model. And so with that, I think I'll just open it up for questions. In the back. Yes. Yeah. I have one. I don't think there's any right or wrong answer when it comes to personality. I think the goal of doing the personality assessment is to understand what your natural style is, because you might have to take action to overcome your natural style to accomplish whatever it is you want to accomplish. I think Ds inherently are more well-suited to be entrepreneurs. Doesn't mean engineers who are typically Cs can't be, and it doesn't mean that all engineers are Cs. There are engineers that can be Ds because everybody doesn't come in the same package.
Going back to that disc analysis, whenever you go into this, you answer this question. Do you ever go, well, tomorrow I'll put A, but today I put, I mean, every time I do an analysis like that, I want to choose all four answers.
All right, so the question was, does your natural answer change between taking the test one day to the next day? When you do the disc analysis, and there's others, Myers-Briggs is another option, and there are others outside of that. really what they do is they strive to figure out what is your natural style and then what is your style under stress. Because often people react very differently in stressful situations than they do in their normal, natural habitat. And people who are very different when they're stressed versus what they are when they're not stressed are inherently in turmoil. And so if in answering these questions, you must be truthful about the answer. And if you don't feel terribly strongly, then it will reflect into what degree you are a D, an I, an S, or a C. But at least for me, in answering the questions, I had a pretty good idea of what the right thing was. But you really have to answer the question honestly, recognizing there's no right or wrong answer. You're looking for information to help you improve your ability to be successful.
I had another question about what you were saying about older is better. Older is better. It could be as far as like your age and your current stage, or as far as like your business and such.
No. It was the older the entrepreneur is, and I presume there's some point of diminishing returns of that, I don't know. The older the entrepreneur is, the more likely they are to be successful. And it relates, I think, primarily to breadth of experience at the time they start a company. So very young entrepreneurs have a less successful rate than older entrepreneurs. But I'm sure at some point that just becomes a non-issue, and I don't know where that point is. And for this class, that's not a message of don't be an entrepreneur. It is recognize that experience contributes to success. Go find ways to get yourself introduced into people with experience, or surround yourself with people who have experience who can help bridge that gap.
Okay, I was asking that question because, like, I was going to ask you how you feel about an engineer coming directly out of college to start a business.
I think there is a value in experience that you only get through the School of Hard Knocks. And when you start that business, you might be perfectly successful. You might not be successful, but you might learn why you weren't and then start again. And that makes you more likely to be successful. If you look at Macy's department store, Macy's was the third attempt to start a business that Mr. Macy had. First two were abysmal failures. The third one turned out to be a household brand name with a Thanksgiving Day parade. So I'm sure he learned out of the first two what went wrong that helped him with the third one. But it doesn't mean you can't be successful. It just means the odds of success is less. And you ought to recognize that and do something to try to overcome that, which is go figure out how you get the value of that experience in your business.
How does Digium decide how much money to put into open source? Because it's marketing, but then you've got to limit how much you invest in that.
Yeah, the question was how do we figure out how much money we're willing to spend into something that we give away? Well, we produce an income statement, and in the income statement we understand how much money we're spending on marketing and what sort of ROI we get on that. And if you consider the development of Asterisk as a marketing expense because it's bringing in those customers, you can work backwards from what is a successful ROI in the marketing world. And we look for something in the range of about a 10x return on our marketing expense. And if it gets significantly out of balance, we would change it because it was out of balance. In general, we try not to spend more than we have to there. That's one guiding factor. But if it became something that was less than a 10x return on marketing investment, we might scale it back at that point as well. In general, it doesn't change. It's pretty steady, and in fact, that's I guess another area of something I would encourage. If you want to start a business, then you have to have some blueprint to figure out how you're going to spend your dollars. Well, in the early days, you got to spend all your dollars building a product. But once you have a product, how much money do you spend trying to sell it? And how much do you spend trying to market it? And how much do I spend to the people who are going to manage, all the business? And a way to figure that out is to go find public companies that are comparable, building a product or service that's comparable to your idea, and see how they structured their business and look at the ones that are successful. Because if they have to publish financials and they publish an income statement, they will publish in the income statement what percentage of their revenue do they spend on sales, what do they spend on marketing, what do they spend on engineering, what do they spend on G&A. And then if you look at enough of those, you might see a trend that says successful companies spend this much in these different categories. So I'm going to build a model that says I'm going to follow the successful companies and use that as your blueprint for figuring out where to spend your money as you have money available to spend. And if you go look in the electronics and communications industry, communications companies spend about 10% of their revenue on marketing. And therefore, that would tell you if you spend $1 on marketing, you better figure out how you're going to get $10 in revenue or that you're not at 10% marketing cost anymore.
We had a student ask the question, what made you decide to leave AdTran and start working with Digium?
In essence, I've been at AdTran for 18 years. It was public. I spent 3/4 of my day talking to industry analysts, and I missed being involved in product and strategy and small company stuff that is, to me, more fun. So AdTran had been a fantastic step in my career. And when I went to AdTran, it was that. It was 90 people, $10 million worth of revenue. We spent all of our time worrying about products and strategy. But then it grew so large that I kind of got away from that and I missed it.
So expanding on that a little further, there was some questions on challenges of the public company. What are your thoughts on that?
I think public companies have an inherent challenge of investors are only looking at short-term returns. And so if you take most companies that are public and you go understand who really has invested, it's in essence what's called institutional investors. Large funds, people who are managing money, and they're graded on their quarterly performance. And so really the only thing they care about for you in general is how well you're doing in a quarterly perspective. And it causes public companies to have short-term thinking. And it's much freer in a private company to be able to make decisions that are in the best long-term interest of the company that might have short-term bad impact on the company. But if you think it's the right thing to do, you don't have the investors, yelling at you that you made some short-term decision that impacted the success of the company, because in general they don't care what happens 3 years from now. So what encouraged me to go out and start a company, one, I think we all romanticize the concept of starting a company and being an entrepreneur. And at that time, I was 26 years old. I was totally caught up in the romance of going off and starting this company and building something out of nothing. And to some degree, it's wonderful that at that point you don't really know what you're signing up for or what you're getting into. Because if you did, you might not do it. And so once you're there, you're in it, and your only choice is to persevere. And that's kind of my story. I couldn't really hear everything. Did you say what sort of habits have I developed? Yeah, well, I guess over time I developed my technique of how I run a company. And I have hopefully tried to improve that technique over time, but it evolved over a long period of time. And in general, I run the company as the person who's leading a whole bunch of very capable people. My goal is to make sure we got the right people in the right jobs and they were all rowing in the same direction. And so I try to assess the quality of the people in those jobs that report to me. And then I establish a very high level, maybe 10 quarterly things that we're going to accomplish for the company this coming quarter. And I publish them, and I ask every department head, to go figure out what you've got to do in your department to make each one of those things happen. And so then they create their objectives for their group based off of that very top line of things we want to accomplish as a company this quarter. And then we write it down and we track it. And at the end of the quarter, we go back and see how we did against what we thought we were going to do. And it gives me a way to hold people accountable for what we're going to do, make sure everybody knows what we're trying to accomplish. And we occasionally change plans midstream, but by planning every quarter, something really has to become urgent to get on the list in mid-quarter. In general, we're being consistent and thoughtful and not having to back up and change our plans. We're headed in the same direction. Everybody knows what direction we're going, and everybody understands what they have to do to try to help us get there. The question was, what are the weaknesses I see in myself? I think, one, I am an optimist. I love technology. I get married to ideas and think they're the world's greatest idea and that they're going to be great. The truth is, as an engineer, you're going to lose some, but you really need to win more than you lose to be able to have a well-balanced business model. So I tend to be very optimistic and enthusiastic about new ideas. And I probably am not as I'm not a micromanager. I'm not a hands-on. I'm not a dictator. I try to lead through this process of empowering people. And I think sometimes when things don't go well, I'm not quick enough to go try to fix it. I kind of build up to a spot where, okay, it's really broken. I have to go fix it, as opposed to jumping on it at the minute something goes out of kilter.
These other entrepreneurial ventures you're involved in, what's your capacity and role in those?
All the ones I listed there, I'm a board member, and in most of them I'm an investor. And so the role is advisor, investor, and trying to help them devise some plan that will allow them to be successful. Oh, one more. It's up to it's fine with me. It's fine with these guys.
All right, thank you.
All right. Thank you.